This Reading Method Made Me High Income, a book by Yusuke Motoyama. Now, before you think this is some get-rich-quick scheme, let me clarify. It's more about uh, really getting the most out of the time you spend reading, especially in this world where we're bombarded with information 24/7.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, I read a lot. Still waiting on that high income, though. Haha.
Right. Well, the author actually addresses this right off the bat. He calls it the trap of self-learning. We kind of assume that soaking up more and more information automatically equals success. But the book argues that a lot of us fall into this trap of just passively consuming stuff without a clear goal in mind.
So it's not about how much H we read, but more about how W we approach it. Is that what you're saying?
You got it. Motoyama kind of flips the script and focuses on output-driven learning. It's about asking yourself, what specific skills do I want to develop? Or what goals am I working towards? Define that output first, then choose the books that'll help you get there. That's your input.
Okay, so instead of just grabbing the latest bestseller, we should be thinking, what problem am I trying to solve? Or what skill do I need to level up?
Exactly. And the book actually outlines two different approaches to picking books, depending on what you're aiming for. For long-term personal growth, he suggests exploring humanities, letting your curiosity lead the way. Imagine you're on a river cruise, just enjoying the journey and seeing what interesting sights pop up along the way.
I like that analogy. It takes the pressure off. But what about when you're facing a very specific, urgent problem? Like, I need to boost sales by 20% this quarter. Kind of urgent.
That's when you switch to what he calls peak climbing mode. Think of it this way. You've got your mountain, which is the problem you need to solve. And to reach the top, you need the right gear. In this case, your gear is the books you choose. Motoyama really emphasizes evaluating how deep a business book goes. It's not enough for it to just offer solutions. The author needs to explain the reasoning behind them, the why, and then give you clear, actionable steps on how to actually implement them.
Okay, that makes total sense. I'm seeing how this could change my whole approach to picking books. But even when we found the right books, this is where Motoyama throws us another curveball. He kind of turns the whole idea of how we should read upside down.
You're talking about that multi-pass reading technique he talks about, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, it definitely challenges some assumptions. Forget about spending hours poring over every single word on the first read. He actually suggests just skimming the book multiple times.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me I should just, glance at entire pages? That almost feels wrong.
It might seem counterintuitive, but bear with me. The first few passes are all about getting a feel for the book, letting your subconscious mind start processing the information, like you're just dipping your toes in the water before taking the plunge. Then, as you revisit the book, you slowly start to focus on specific sections. Titles, bold text, beginnings and ends of chapters. You're slowly zooming in on the map, so to speak.
So it's about repeated exposure, letting those ideas simmer in your mind over time. Interesting.
Exactly. And by the time you get to the final passes, when you're actually diving deep into the sections that really resonated with you, your understanding is way deeper because your brain has already been working on it in the background. It's like having a head start.
This is definitely making me rethink my reading habits. But even with this multi-pass technique, how do we make sure we actually remember the most important stuff? I mean, that's where the one-page note-taking method comes in, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
Think about it. How much of a book do you actually remember a week later or a month later?
Honestly, not nearly as much as I'd like.
Right. Well, Motoyama's point is that we should focus on capturing that, say, 20% of the book's content. That's pure gold, really valuable stuff. And the one-page summary is his tool for doing just that.
Okay, I love the idea of condensing an entire book down to a single page. That just sounds so efficient. But I imagine it takes some practice to get good at it. Where do you even begin with something like that?
He actually gives a pretty clear formula. First, you got to figure out the central question or problem the book's addressing. Then, what's the author's proposed solution? Once you've got those two pillars, you start extracting the key supporting points and any quotes or excerpts that really drive home the point.
So we're creating a blueprint of the book's core argument, like the Spark Notes version, but more in-depth.
Yeah, exactly. But it goes a bit deeper than just summarizing. You want to articulate the why behind the solution. Why is this approach valid? Why does it work? And also the how. How can you actually apply this in your own life?
This is really fascinating. It's like you're having a conversation with the author and their ideas, not just passively absorbing them.
That's a great way to put it. And the cool thing is you can tailor this method to your own learning style. The book outlines 3 different formats for these one-page summaries, from super detailed, complete key points to more concise, brief bullet points if you're all about those actionable takeaways. It's about finding what works best for you.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about finding what clicks with you and your learning goals. Man, this is giving me a lot to think about already. So where do we go from here?
Well, now that we've tackled choosing our books and even how to read them, let's talk about some common pitfalls people fall into with note-taking and some advanced techniques to really level up.
All right, so we've carefully chosen our books, we've skimmed, we've zoomed in, and we've even managed to condense pages of wisdom down to, like, a single sheet. But what happens next? Do those one-page summaries just end up, I don't know, tucked away in a folder somewhere?
That's where we got to shift gears. We're going from just being efficient readers to becoming, as Motoyama calls it, knowledge architects. It's not enough to just take good notes. We got to actually build something with them.
Knowledge architects. I like the sound of that. So how do we actually make that jump, going from passive reading to actually building this knowledge architecture?
Well, one of the key things the book emphasizes is synthesizing insights from multiple books. Like no single author has all the answers, right? By comparing and contrasting different viewpoints, that's how we start to develop our own unique perspective.
That makes sense. But with so many books out there, how do we even begin to sort through all these different and sometimes conflicting viewpoints? It's easy to feel overwhelmed.
That's exactly where those one-page summaries become so powerful. The book suggests using that what, why, how framework for each book. What are the key solutions being proposed? Why does the author believe this approach is effective? And then specifically, how do they recommend implementing it? And by analyzing multiple books through this lens, you start to see, like, the bigger picture.
So instead of just accepting one author's word as gospel, we're actively evaluating their arguments, seeing where they agree, where they disagree. Kind of like a judge in a book court, weighing all the evidence.
Exactly. It helps you identify the strengths and weaknesses of each approach, and then ultimately form your own informed opinion. You're not just taking someone's word for it.
That's such a crucial point, especially nowadays when we're constantly hit with conflicting information from all sides. It's easy to just get swept up by whatever the latest trend or guru is saying, but this approach really empowers us to think for ourselves.
Couldn't agree more. And Motoyama really drives home the point that knowledge isn't just about memorizing facts. It's about developing the ability to think critically, to think independently. That's where true intellectual freedom comes from.
Speaking of putting knowledge into action, it's easy to get bogged down in analysis paralysis. We overthink things and then we never actually do anything with what we've learned. How do we actually bridge that gap, from theory to practice?
Well, the book offers a few strategies for that. One technique is to try explaining the concepts you've learned to someone else, but in your own words. It's like you're teaching the material.
Oh, so like what I'm doing right now, explaining these ideas to our listeners.
Exactly. By putting it into your own words, you have to clarify your understanding, see if there are any gaps in your knowledge. It's like you're taking it from your mental library and moving it into your mental toolbox, making it readily available to use.
That's a great way to put it. So are there any other knowledge leverage strategies we can use to make that leap? From theory to action, I mean?
Yeah, for sure. The book encourages actively looking for opportunities to put what you're learning into practice. Like maybe you experiment with a new productivity technique at work, or you try out a new communication strategy in your personal life, or even just try applying a concept from a book to a current project you're working on. The key is to just make that jump from thinking about it to actually doing it.
Okay, I'm definitely feeling motivated to start applying some of this stuff. But I'm also someone who needs to see tangible results to stay motivated. How do I know if this approach is actually working for me?
Tracking your progress is huge. It could be something as simple as setting a goal to read a certain number of books each month, or to implement, say, 3 new ideas from those books. Or maybe you track how your understanding of a topic has changed over time by, comparing your initial one-page summary to a revised version you do after you've put those concepts into practice. It's about creating a feedback loop to really see how far you've come.
That's such a smart idea. It's like having a progress bar for your learning journey. But there's one thing you mentioned earlier that I'm really curious about, knowledge leverage. Can we unpack that a little bit more?
Oh yeah, for sure. This is where it gets really interesting. Motoyama basically says that real mastery isn't just about hoarding a ton of knowledge. It's about understanding how different pieces of knowledge connect and interact, and then using those connections to actually create something new.
So it's not just about knowing a bunch of stuff, it's about knowing how to use that knowledge effectively.
Precisely. And those one-page summaries, they become your building blocks. Each one represents a key insight, a tool in your mental toolkit. And the real magic starts happening when you start connecting those tools, seeing how they complement each other, how they maybe even contradict each other.
I love that image. It's like you have all these Lego bricks. They're cool on their own, but it's not until you start putting them together that you can build something truly unique and awesome.
That's a perfect analogy. And the book actually gives some strategies for leveraging knowledge effectively. One approach is to look for patterns, recurring themes that pop up across different books. Like, are there common threads, underlying principles that connect seemingly unrelated ideas?
So it's about spotting those aha moments, those connections where you're like, oh, I never thought of it that way before.
You got it. And sometimes those connections will totally challenge what you thought you knew, force you to question conventional wisdom. That's another key part of knowledge leverage, being willing to let go of outdated beliefs and embrace new perspectives, even if they feel a little uncomfortable at first.
This is making me think about all those times I've been stuck in a rut, approaching problems from the same old angle. This approach is all about being more flexible and creative in your thinking.
Exactly. And finally, Motoyama suggests actively seeking out knowledge gaps. What are the areas where your understanding is, like, incomplete? What are the missing pieces of the puzzle? And once you pinpoint those gaps, you can use targeted reading to fill them in, choosing books specifically designed to help you bridge those gaps.
It's like having a treasure map, but for knowledge. And each book is a clue that leads you closer to that ultimate treasure, intellectual freedom. But this whole process, I imagine it takes a certain kind of mindset. It's not just about techniques, it's about how you approach learning in general, right?
You're hitting the nail on the head. Motoyama dedicates a big chunk of the book to the importance of having what he calls a growth mindset.
I've heard that term before, but to be honest, I'm not totally clear on what it means. Could you break it down for us?
A growth mindset is basically believing that your abilities, even your intelligence, aren't fixed. They can be developed through effort and learning. It's the opposite of thinking, I'm just not good at this.
So it's about seeing challenges as opportunities to grow and viewing setbacks as temporary bumps in the road, not like the end of the world.
Exactly. A growth mindset allows you to approach new information with curiosity and a genuine willingness to learn, even if it feels tough or maybe even a little uncomfortable at first. And it's really essential for making the most of reading because it helps you stick with it, even when you hit those challenging concepts. It keeps you motivated on your learning journey.
Man, this is really resonating with me. I know I've definitely had times where I've felt discouraged by a book or a topic and just wanted to give up. But thinking about it as a chance to grow, yeah, that totally changes things. I'm curious, what are some of your biggest takeaways so far from this deep dive?
I think what's really striking me is how Motoyama reframes reading as this strategic tool for personal and professional development. It's not just about passively taking in information. It's about actively shaping and using that knowledge to achieve your goals.
I couldn't agree more. And I love how much he emphasizes making connections between different ideas and having that growth mindset. This deep dive has definitely changed how I think about reading.
It's been amazing exploring these ideas with you. But before we wrap up part 2, there's one last concept from the book I want to introduce.
So we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about choosing the right books, that multi-pass reading technique, how to boil down those key insights into one-page summaries, and even how to become knowledge architects, building our own frameworks. What's next? Do we just head off to our reading nooks and, start putting all this into practice?
Well, there's one final piece to this puzzle that Motoyama really emphasizes. It's the idea of community learning. It's not just about studying in isolation. It's about connecting with others, making it a shared experience.
So it's like we've built the house, and now it's time to have a housewarming party and invite people in.
You got it. Remember those one-page summaries? Well, he actually encourages us to share those publicly. Online, maybe with colleagues at work, even in a book club setting. It might feel kind of scary at first, but the benefits are huge.
Okay, color me intrigued. What's so great about sharing those summaries? I mean, it seems counterintuitive. Why give away all your hard-earned insights?
Well, for one thing, when you have to explain something to someone else, it forces you to really understand it yourself, right? It's like you're teaching the material, which is one of the best ways to learn. Plus, when you share your notes, you open yourself up to feedback, different perspectives. You might discover blind spots you didn't even realize you had, or learn from someone else's take on the material.
Yeah, getting that outside perspective can be so valuable. It's easy to get stuck in your own head.
For sure. And finally, sharing creates a sense of community. You're on this learning journey together. It's not a solitary thing anymore, and that can be incredibly motivating and inspiring.
Like you have a support system for your intellectual growth. You're not just reading for yourself, you're reading for the group and contributing to the collective knowledge. I like that.
Exactly. The book even talks about building a knowledge network. A group of people who are all passionate about learning, committed to helping each other grow. It could be online, offline, formal, informal. The point is to surround yourself with people who push you to think differently and inspire you to keep learning.
That's like having your own personal board of advisors, but for your intellectual development. Cool. You know, Throughout this whole deep dive, we've been talking about intellectual freedom. It sounds great and all, but I gotta admit, it's a little abstract. What does that actually look like, in real life?
That's a really good question. For Motoyama, it's about being able to think critically, form your own opinions, and navigate the world with, confidence and clarity. It's about not being swayed by, trends or dogma, but having the tools and the mindset to evaluate information yourself. Connect the dots and come to your own conclusions.
So it's about taking charge of your own learning, your own growth. You become the architect of your own intellectual journey. It's not just reading books, it's reading them in a way that empowers you to think for yourself.
Exactly. And Motoyama believes that by really mastering the techniques we've talked about today, from choosing the right books, to multi-pass reading, to those one-page summaries, to leveraging knowledge and learning with others, you can really unlock your full potential and reach that level of intellectual freedom.
This deep dive has been amazing. It's honestly changed the way I think about reading and learning. I feel like I have this whole new set of tools and like a renewed sense of purpose.
I'm so glad to hear that. And before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought. Remember that peak climbing method we talked about? Choosing books strategically based on those challenges you're facing. What's the peak you're trying to climb right now?
Good question. It could be a professional goal, a personal challenge, or just the deeper understanding of a specific topic. Whatever that peak is, what book could be your guide on that climb?
That's something I want our listeners to think about. And remember, this journey of learning, it never really ends. There's always another peak to climb, another challenge to tackle.
I love that. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage everyone listening to just keep exploring, keep questioning, keep pushing the boundaries of their knowledge.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into this reading method made me high income. It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, happy reading, everyone!